In today's video, we're diving into a story about a woman who spent years feeling unseen inside her own home. Until one moment, one quiet shift, began to unravel everything she thought she understood about her marriage, her family, and herself. The rain had a rhythm that usually soothed Claire Thompson, a soft and steady tapping against the wide kitchen window of her small Oregon home. Rain always made her feel grounded, like the world was slowing down just long enough for her to breathe. But lately, even the comfort of a rainy morning couldn't reach the place inside her that felt heavy. Heavy in a way she didn't have words for. Claire moved around the kitchen with the same motions she repeated every morning. Filling the coffee maker, arranging the dishes, straightening the decorative pillows on the little bench under the window. She didn't need to do any of these things. She just needed something, anything, to occupy her mind long enough to avoid the silence. The silence had become her shadow. In the living room, her husband Mark sat in his old recliner, half asleep, wrapped in the dull glow of the television. A news anchor droned on about a political debate, words blending into background noise. Mark didn't look bad. He didn't look stressed. He simply looked gone. Not physically. Emotionally. He wasn't a cruel man. He wasn't irresponsible. He worked long hours, paid the bills, kept the house stable. But Claire was learning, painfully, that stability isn't the same as love. Not anymore. Mark rarely spoke without being prompted, and even then his responses were short, practical, measured. Never warm. Never curious. Never affectionate. He had slowly become someone who lived beside her, not with her. Claire kept telling herself she shouldn't feel this way. She had a home. A marriage. A routine. Everything people said she should want. So why did she feel like she was disappearing? She tried reminding herself of the early years. The years when Mark used to surprise her with midnight drives to the coast, or crack ridiculous jokes until she laughed so hard she couldn't breathe. He used to look at her like she was the entire view. Now he looked at her like she was background. People change, she told herself. Even when you don't expect them to. She had tried reaching him, so many times. But every attempt felt like pushing against a locked door. "We'll talk later," he always murmured. "I'm tired," he added, eyes still glued to his phone. Eventually Claire stopped trying. Stopping hurt less than trying. But there was one person who still brought life into the house. Her 17-year-old son Ethan. He had Mark's eyes, the same shade, the same shape, but with none of his father's dimness. Ethan's eyes were bright, expressive. He was curious about everything. He asked questions because he cared, not because he wanted information. Ethan had this way of making any room feel lighter just by walking into it. Claire had always said he carried sunshine in his voice. That evening, she heard the familiar creak of the third stair. The one Mark had promised to fix years ago but never did. Ethan appeared in the doorway, shaking rain from his hair, and dropping his backpack onto a chair. "Mom? You good?" he asked immediately. He always noticed. Something in his tone wrapped around her like a warm blanket. Gentle, attentive, sincere in a way she rarely felt from anyone. "I'm fine," Claire answered automatically, a soft smile pulling at her lips even though the smile didn't touch her eyes. Ethan leaned against the counter, opening a granola bar. "Dad asleep again?" he asked. Claire nodded. "Looks like it." Ethan sighed, not in annoyance but in concern. "You've been quiet lately," he said carefully. "Like something's bothering you." Claire froze. Her son saw her more clearly than her husband ever had. It made her heart ache. "It's nothing," she whispered, trying to sound convincing. Ethan didn't believe her. She could see it. But he didn't push. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here," he said gently. Then he walked upstairs, leaving behind a warmth that faded too quickly once he was gone. Claire leaned against the counter, closed her eyes, took a slow breath. She wished, just once, that her husband would speak to her with even half the attention her son naturally gave her. She wished Mark would see her. Really see her. The house felt even quieter after Ethan went upstairs. The rain slowed. The air felt still. Claire walked into the living room. Mark hadn't moved an inch. The TV flickered. The empty bowl he'd eaten from hours ago still sat untouched on the table. She opened her mouth to say something, anything. But she closed it again. What was the point? He wouldn't hear her. Not the way she needed to be heard. Her voice had become background noise in her own marriage. Claire stepped back into the kitchen, and under the warm glow of the lights, she whispered something she'd never admitted aloud. Is this all there is? She didn't crave crazy passion or dramatic romance. She just wanted connection. To feel alive. To feel valued. And she hadn't felt that in years. As the last drops of rain slid down the window, she stared at the empty house that once held so much promise. Now it felt like the walls were swallowing her piece by piece. Then she heard it, a sound so soft she almost missed it. A door opening upstairs. A step on the creaky floorboard. She didn't know it then, but that faint noise signaled the beginning of something that would change everything. Everything she believed about her life, her marriage, her future. Nothing after that night would feel the same. The next morning looked ordinary from the outside, but Claire woke with the same weight pressing against her chest. A weight she'd grown used to carrying. She moved slowly, as though her body wasn't fully connected to her thoughts. Mark had already left for work. No kisgudvie. No take care. Not even a glance that lasted more than a second. Just a quick, bye, running late. Mumbled while he slipped one arm into his coat, eyes glued to his phone. The door closed, and the house exhaled into emptiness. Claire stepped into the kitchen and began making breakfast. Eggs, toast, a little fruit she sliced more out of habit than hunger. She focused on the sizzling sound in the pan, the one sound in the house that felt alive. As she set 2 plates on the table, she heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Ethan appeared, hair messy, hoodie half-zipped, backpack dangling from one shoulder. Even tired, he carried an energy that brightened the room in a way Mark hadn't in years. "Morning, Mom," he said with a warm, sleepy smile. "Morning," Claire echoed softly. Ethan took a bite of toast, then paused. His eyes scanned her face, quietly, carefully. "Mom, you seem different lately," he said gently. "Are you okay?" Claire froze. Her throat tightened. She wanted to give him a real answer, something honest, something that explained the quiet grief she carried. But honesty felt dangerous. Too heavy for a 17-year-old boy who deserved to focus on his future, not her pain. "I'm fine," she replied, but even to her own ears, the words sounded thin. Ethan tilted his head, studying her with a kind of maturity that didn't belong to someone his age. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said softly. "You can tell me if something's wrong." His voice was patient, not demanding. He wasn't pushing. He was offering. Claire felt something warm and painful twist inside her, a longing she didn't know how to name. She forced a small smile. "It's nothing big, just life," she whispered. Ethan didn't argue. He didn't roll his eyes or brush her off. He just nodded with quiet understanding. He finished breakfast, slung his backpack over his shoulder, and paused by her side before heading to the door. "If you ever want to talk," he said, "I'm here." Those 4 words hit her like a soft lightning bolt. Not shocking, but illuminating. "Thank you," Claire whispered. Once he left, the silence rushed in again, but it felt harsher this time. Like the house itself was reminding her how empty it had become. Later that day, the house was still and quiet when Claire heard the door open and close. Ethan dropped onto the couch with a heavy sigh, the kind that came from long school days and teenage worries he hadn't shared yet. "Mom," he called out. Claire walked into the living room, a folded towel still in her hands. Ethan sat up straighter, brushing hair off his forehead. "Can we talk?" he asked. Those 3 words always carried weight, a different weight than when Mark used to say them. Mark's "we need to talk" meant bills or small annoyances. Ethan's "can we talk" meant something mattered. "Of course," Claire said, sitting beside him. The couch cushions dipped slightly between them, but the space didn't feel like distance. Not the way it always did between her and Mark. With Ethan she felt present. Seen. Real. "I was thinking about college," Ethan began slowly. "About where I want to go." Claire softened. "Any ideas?" "Maybe UCLA," he said. "Or NYU. Or maybe even Vancouver. I want to study film. I want to make something meaningful, something people feel." His voice lit up with every word. His eyes sparkled with something she hadn't seen in Mark's eyes for years. Dreams. Claire loved it. She loved seeing him come alive when he talked about his future. Have you told your dad? She asked carefully. Ethan hesitated. His silence answered the question before he did. He just doesn't ask, Ethan murmured. I try sometimes, but he seems distracted. Or tired. Or just not interested. Claire's heart broke a little at that. Not just because she understood, but because it mirrored her own experience. I'm proud of you, Claire said quietly, placing her hand on his. Whatever you choose. Ethan smiled, a soft, grateful smile. But Claire noticed something else, something unspoken, flicker across his face before he looked away. A sadness, maybe. Or worry. Or confusion he didn't know how to voice. Mom, he said after a moment. Yes. You've been sad for a while, he said gently. I can't explain it, but I feel it. I see it. And I don't know what to do. Claire swallowed hard. Her eyes stung. This was the moment she feared. The moment her quiet suffering became visible to the only person she wished didn't have to notice. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered, but her voice cracked. Ethan turned toward her fully now. Concerned, attentive, present. Is it Dad? He asked cautiously. The question hit her like a wave. Claire didn't answer. She didn't trust herself to. Not yet. Ethan hesitated, then added softly. I don't want to overstep. But I can tell when something is wrong. Claire's breath trembled. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a confession. One she wasn't allowed to make. One she shouldn't make. Her marriage was her responsibility. Her loneliness was her burden. Ethan was her son, not her emotional lifeline. But God, how she wished she could tell someone, anyone. How invisible she felt. I'm okay, she whispered again. But this time, even she didn't believe the words. Ethan didn't push further. He didn't pressure her. He simply took a deeper breath and leaned back against the couch. But Claire could feel it, the shift. The air between them had changed. Something unspoken had opened a crack. Something emotional, fragile, complicated. A connection she didn't fully understand yet. A connection she couldn't name. Yet.